It's our #1 unsolved mystery in New Mexico, that 4 people could just vanish from the face of the earth, never again be found, without a trace.
It became apparent that something really bad had happened to their family.
Obviously, this is a catastrophe. This is a real tragedy. 4 people are there, and then they're gone. The event really just fueled this idea that New Mexico was the Wild West.
There were tourists on a driving tour of the West. After a stop in Albuquerque, they disappeared and were never seen again. Even though the kidnapping and ruthless murder of 2 middle-aged couples decades ago ranks among New Mexico's most infamous unsolved crimes, hardly anyone today has heard of the case. But go back 90 years to 1935, and you would be hard-pressed to find anyone who didn't know the gut-wrenching details of 4 innocent tourists who ventured into the land of enchantment and disappeared.
There was never been anything like it before. I don't think there's been anything like it since. So it was really a big deal.
Don Bolus is a retired law enforcement officer and historian.
It became a nationwide story. These 4 people had just vanished off the face of the earth, and nobody had the slightest idea where they were or what had become of them.
They were George Lorius, his wife Laura, Albert Heberer, and his wife Tilly. George owned a coal company in East St. Louis. Albert was a barber in DuQuoin, Illinois. Early on a Sunday in May 90 years ago, the 2 couples packed up George's 29 Nash and set out on a leisurely road trip to California. On May 21st, the couples checked into the Vaughn Hotel, signing their names on the hotel register. The next morning, they drove to Albuquerque and mailed postcards at the downtown post office. At 11 a.m., Albert Heberer wrote, "Everybody okay, no trouble of any kind, going to Boulder Dam." The cards were postmarked May 22nd, 1935, 12:30 p.m. The 4 Illinois tourists were never seen or heard from again. The next morning, 6 miles south of Socorro, the tourist car was found wrecked. It was being driven by a slender young man about 21, with long hair, a scar on his cheek, and a tattoo. The vehicle was towed to a Socorro service station where it was repaired. Later that day, the Nash was involved in yet another accident, this time 44 miles south of Socorro. Mrs. Clyde Cole helped the young man free the vehicle from a ditch. Decades later, Mrs. Cole recalled the driver was nervous and appeared scared. That night, he checked into room 7 at the Buckler Hotel in El Paso, signing the hotel register James Sullivan, East St. Louis. The next day, the car thief headed east, leaving a string of forged Lorius traveler's checks along the way. That night, he checked into the Tex Hotel in Big Springs, signing the registration card George Lorius. The following day, he forged more traveler's checks, spending the night at the Worth Hotel in Fort Worth. In the morning, the inexperienced driver had his 3rd accident in so many days. He collided with another vehicle and forged one of the Lorius traveler's checks to pay for the damage. The next day, the stolen Nash was found abandoned on a Dallas street. The young man who called himself James Sullivan disappeared. Alarm bells went off in Illinois. There had been no word from the 2 couples in more than a week. Thus began the largest manhunt in New Mexico history, personally led by Governor Clyde Tingley.
They searched literally hundreds of miles of roadways and distances on both sides of suspected roadways. They used the National Guard. They used military personnel. They even had a cavalry unit that came in on horseback.
New Mexico was in shock when these tourists disappeared.
Rob Martinez is New Mexico's state historian.
The governor didn't know what to do. He was afraid of the impact it would have on tourism. So the state was reeling and trying to figure out what happened and how this could happen.
Governor Tingley offered a $1,000 reward for information leading to the discovery of the bodies, so he was pretty well convinced that they had been murdered.
The newly formed state police launched a criminal investigation. Officially dubbed State Police Case Number 1, the missing tourists became front-page news. Details of the case were splashed across newspapers and magazines throughout the country, but there were precious few clues. A bullet found in the abandoned Nash, handwriting, smudged fingerprints, and eyewitness accounts of a nervous, long-haired man with a tattoo. A month after the disappearance, a cowboy riding Albuquerque's East Mason rangeland came upon a grisly discovery. Dumped in an arroyo were the charred remains of personal property belonging to the tourists, including burned clothing and Laura Loris's eyeglasses. The FBI was called in. Search parties scoured remote stretches of the New Mexico outback for clues. Over the course of 3 decades, hundreds of suspects were investigated. Amateur detectives from all over the country weighed in with their own theories. However, the remains have never been located. James Sullivan, alias John Doe, was indicted by a federal grand jury. However, the arrest warrant has yet to be served.
The perpetrators of this crime knew what they were doing. They knew how to dispose of the bodies.
It was just devastating to lose them.
Amy Ashcraft is Laura Loris's great-great-niece.
What do you want people to know about Laura Loris?
That she was murdered at 54 beside her husband and her 2 closest friends, life stolen from her. They were on a vacation and they had no idea that this would happen to them.
The killer's trail has gone stone cold. The last lead in the case dried up decades ago. Today, 90 years later, State Police Case Number 1 remains open and unsolved.
Maybe the 4 of them went to South America and lived happily ever after for the rest of their lives. We don't know, but it'll always be with us. It's always a part of New Mexico history.
I don't know that we'll ever find their bodies. I do know this as a historian. Wherever people have gone, they leave a footprint. They leave a mark. So there's always the hope that there's something out there that'll tell us what happened to them.
I want to find them. We would like to pay our family respects. May you now and forevermore rest in peace.
Larry Barker, KRQE News 13.
When you blow it like this with public money at a project that no one's going to go to, it's just a big waste of money.
From the perspective of New Mexico taxpayers, what does that building represent?
A loss, a huge loss.
Who the heck thought it was a good idea to build it where they built it?
We don't know who chose this spot on the prairie for a taxpayer-funded tourist attraction. What we do know is when it was plopped down amidst the creosote and mesquite south of Socorro, it became a case study for misguided and ill-conceived government waste. Welcome to the El Camino Real Heritage Center, a history museum dedicated to the Royal Road of the Interior. Established by Spanish conquistadors, the historic byway extended from Mexico City to north of Santa Fe. The Royal Road was in use for 3 centuries. However, the museum lasted barely a decade. Due to shoddy planning, it had few visitors. meager revenue, expensive maintenance, and inadequate infrastructure. 9 years after it opened, the monument was closed, artifacts packed away, exhibits dismantled, and the gift shop emptied. Today, all there is to show for taxpayers' multi-million-dollar museum is an abandoned building 40 miles from nowhere.
When you look at that building today, what goes through your mind?
What a complete waste of taxpayer dollars.
State legislator Gail Armstrong represents House District 49, which includes the museum site.
What did taxpayers get for the $4 million investment?
Nothing. It just cost them a ton of money. Nothing.
If you had to explain the El Camino Real Heritage Center to taxpayers today, how would you explain this building?
We blew it.
John Garcia is an economic development expert, having served in state cabinet posts under 2 governors.
On paper, this didn't look like a project that should be funded. This is not how government is supposed to work.
To understand how this happened, you need to take a close look at the state legislature and how it spends public money. Now, most legislative appropriations undergo strict checks and balances, including open hearings and debate.
But there are exceptions. In fact, each year, tens of millions of dollars are doled out behind closed doors. It's called capital outlay, a legislative system that allows individual lawmakers to allocate public money for infrastructure projects. Now, under capital outlay, ventures are funded without justification, feasibility studies, planning, hearings, or even debate.
Consider the Oñate Visitor Center in the northern New Mexico village of Alcalde. State lawmakers blindly allocated almost $2 million for a colossal monument and statue honoring notorious Spanish conquistador Juan de Oñate. At the time, no one questioned the extravagant appropriation. However, today, the multi-million-dollar monolith will likely go down in legislative history as an ill-advised waste of taxpayer money. Plagued by poor planning, vandalism, remote location, and a controversial statue, the state-owned facility opened in '93 and closed a few years later.
They built a big facility in northern New Mexico on a road that didn't have a lot of traffic. It was the theory, build it and they will come. However, nobody came.
John Garcia was New Mexico's Secretary of Tourism.
I sold it on behalf of the government for $1 back to the county because we couldn't afford to operate the facility that there was nothing in it.
Since the visitor center was shut down 17 years ago, the building has been leased to a charter school, flea market, yoga studio, and now a chicken feed and macaroni manufacturing operation. And then there's the El Camino Real Museum. Armed with $4 million from the state legislature and the Bureau of Land Management, consultants were hired to find the best place to build the new museum. After studying various locations, they chose a remote spot on the prairie 37 miles south of Socorro. The experts said, build here and the museum will draw 100,000 visitors a year, bring in $10 million to the region, and create 174 new jobs. At the time, no one raised a red flag about putting a tourist attraction in an out-of-the-way location. It was only after construction was complete that state officials learned the so-called experts were dead wrong. The expensive project was doomed to fail before it even opened its doors.
I don't think there's any good excuse or any rationale for anybody to try to defend a project like this. From the beginning, it should have been scrutinized for its efficacy, its benefit to the public, and none of that was done.
So what do you do with a $4 million deserted building in the middle of nowhere? Well, the museum was closed and then abandoned 8 years ago because the Cultural Affairs Department made little effort to secure the empty building. Today, it is no longer habitable. Time and vandals have taken a toll. Copper wiring has been stolen. There is significant structural damage, mold, a rodent infestation, and no electricity or lights. Most of the HVAC, electrical, plumbing, water, and septic systems are either obsolete or inoperable. Now, Cultural Affairs officials are faced with two options: repair the building at an estimated cost of $3.5 million, or tear it down and restore the site to prairie. Price tag for demolition, $840,000. Ann McCudden heads up New Mexico's Historic Sites Division.
Is an option for the department to simply leave the building, just leave it there?
No, absolutely not, no.
The property is owned by the Museum of New Mexico. Dr. George Goldstein is president of the Board of Regents.
It was an expensive mistake. And now it's up to the Board of Regents to sadly have to make a decision on that historic site, whether to repair it, it's in terrible disrepair, and that's very concerning, or to demolish it. But that's going to become the most important decision we made all this year.
We will certainly learn from this effort, take those mistakes and learn from them. That's about what we can get out of it. There isn't obviously any value to the building.
I think this was a slap in the face to the public, and if we don't learn from this, then we're the fools.
Larry Barker, KRQE, News 13. Consider some of the greatest technology breakthroughs of the past 6 decades. We unlocked the secrets of DNA. Commercially viable electric automobiles became a reality. And then there was the moonwalk.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
But there's one technological development that has proven stubbornly elusive. You see, long ago we figured out how to land a man on the moon, but today we can't seem to get Wi-Fi to work on a moving train. Case in point, the Rail Runner. Some of the brightest minds in New Mexico devoted more than a decade to the problem. However, despite several unsuccessful installations, Wi-Fi on the Rail Runner proved to be a tough nut to crack. And what do taxpayers have to show for a 10-year, multi-million-dollar investment in railroad Wi-Fi? Piles of discarded cables, routers, antennas, transmitters, and miscellaneous electronic doodads.
It upsets me. I do not want to misuse taxpayer money.
Dewey Cave heads up Rio Metro, which operates the Rail Runner.
I was surprised that it didn't work. But we are going to find somebody accountable.
Shortly after the Rail Runner began operation in 2008, installation of an onboard wireless network became a priority. The goal? Give passengers a means to stay connected while riding the rails from Berlin to Santa Fe. In 2013, after New Mexico's Transportation Department shelled out some $2.8 million, passenger Wi-Fi on the Rail Runner became a reality. Well, sort of. You see, the new wireless system only worked intermittently, and then not at all.
Today, what's the value of the WiMAX Wi-Fi equipment to the Rail Runner and to taxpayers?
Zero value.
Robert Gonzalez is Rio Metro's Director of Operations.
The company went out of business. The equipment became obsolete and non-functional, and we could not replace or buy parts to replace any of the radios or any of the components that were associated with that project.
Electronic hardware worth millions was unceremoniously dumped beside the tracks, and just like that, Rail Runner Wi-Fi was back to square one. 2020, Rio Metro contracted with a company called Wabtec to install a new wireless system that included, once again, 40-foot radio towers, routers, servers, antennas, and rail car modifications. In October 2022, the $5.3 million Wi-Fi construction project was turned on. 18 months later, it was turned off.
To my surprise and dismay, it didn't work. It worked in some areas it didn't. And so we kept after them to fix it, but they never did fix it to our satisfaction.
Rio Metro soon discovered just buying expensive electronic equipment doesn't necessarily mean the gear is going to work. You see, New Mexico's commuter railroad has its own unique challenges.
We're a 100-mile corridor. It's undulating territory. It's curvature. We have to go through a canyon, and you're going from Belen, 4,000 feet, to Santa Fe, 7,200 feet. And we worked with Wabtec for over a year. I mean, we went out on the trains testing this thing. It was a tasking job to try and get this thing up and running correctly. I mean, we were at weekly meetings, daily trips, writing reports, and arguing with Wabtec, but it just never lived up to its standards.
Today, the Wabtec Wi-Fi equipment installed on the Rail Runner, is that being used today for its intended purpose?
No, sir.
Rio Metro shelled out $5.3 million for a workable Wi-Fi system. Did you get what you paid for?
No, sir.
The expensive wireless network was permanently dismantled in April.
It upsets me, and we're talking to our attorneys to see what options we have.
Add it all up, and taxpayers have shelled out more than $8 million for Rail Runner's non-functioning equipment. When you think of that pile of Wi-Fi hardware sitting in the rail yards, just rotting in the elements, what goes through your mind?
It was a waste. Yeah, it's a pile of rubbish.
Larry Barker, KRQE, News 13.